Welcome to AP Environmental Science. In this video, we are going to discuss integrated pest management, better known as IPM. Now, the whole idea behind IPM is to address the issues with conventional pesticides. Now, heavy use or reliance on chemical pesticides can be very detrimental to the environment. So if you are using broad spectrum pesticides, you are going to be killing off those non-target species. If you apply too much of the pesticides, water supplies could become contaminated, and if humans are exposed to these in large quantities, that human health could be compromised. Now, some pesticides are also what is called persistent, meaning that they persist or remain in the environment for long periods of time. In other words, they don't really break down, they just keep working for a long time. Other pesticides, such as atrazine, are what are called endocrine disruptors. And remember, endocrine disruptors, these actually change the hormones of living things. There are documented cases of some of these endocrine disruptors actually changing the sex organs of amphibians, turning male frogs into reproductive female frogs. And that's because of an exposure to this particular pesticide. Now, integrated pest management is trying to use a combination of methods to focus in and eliminate those pest species, but we're trying to reduce the amount of those traditional chemical pesticides used. So we want to reduce that pesticide treadmill, and we want to reduce any kind of poisoning of these non-target species. Now the key here is that we're not trying to exterminate all pests. That's impossible. These organisms are part of the environment, they're part of that ecosystem, and extermination of that species just isn't feasible. So what we're trying to do instead is manage that pest and bring it down to a level that creates an acceptable amount of loss or damage to the crop. Now, integrative pest management is a cycle. There's no real end point to this. We start by identifying what particular pest is in an area, and then we try to figure out some solutions. We observe that pest with crop monitoring and some sticky traps, and then we do actual control. And that control can come in the form of mechanical, biological, or chemical, and we'll go through those each one at a time. However, after doing your control method, we're again evaluating how effective this particular control method actually is. The first type of control is biological control, and these are introducing natural pest predators to try to reduce whatever is harming your crops. Now, some examples of these would be things like a praying mantis, which is a predatory insect that will go out and kill other insects. They're not going to go after your crops, they're going to go after those insects that are going after your crops. We also have things like ladybugs, green lacewings, and parasitic wasps. Now, the farm cat is sometimes thrown in here as a biological control. While yes, they do help to reduce the number of small rodents around farm buildings, outdoor cats actually cause more harm than good, particularly attacking vulnerable songbird populations and other native wildlife. So in general, if you have the option, please keep cats indoors. Keeps the cat healthier, keeps the wildlife healthier. There's other things you can do to control those particular pests. The second type of IPM is a physical control. Now, these are physical barriers to prevent a particular pest from attacking your crop. Now, this could be a physical layer of a screen or a weed blocker to prevent plants from growing up in between your desired crops, so to keep the weeds down. This could be a physical screen or net around the branches of, say, a fruit tree to prevent insects from getting in and attacking the growth. Or this could be actual tilling or turning over of the ground and setting out physical traps to capture any type of insects or monitor those pest populations. The third type would be chemical controls. Now, we just said at the beginning that IPM is trying to reduce the amount of chemical pesticides used, but chemicals do still have a place in this. Now, this is that standard pest control, and typically it's used as a last resort, or this is using a very narrow targeted type of pesticide. Now, typical standard pest control is a broad spectrum. However, with IPM, we try to pick the particular pesticides that are more narrow. Now, glyphosate, atrazine, DDT, those are more of the broad spectrum ones, but there are narrower, more focused chemicals on the market. Some other methods include crop rotation or alternating which plants are in a field each particular year. So say you have a field of corn and you have a pretty strong infestation of corn rootworm beetle. Now, that particular beetle primarily attacks corn plants. If the following year you plant something other than corn in that field, that population is going to start to decline. So that way, the following year after that, if you go back to corn, you're going to have less of an impact from that particular pest. We also have this thing called intercropping, or planting two different varieties of plants in the same field. Now, the idea behind this is that the pests that attack one crop are not going to attack the one next to it. However, things that might be living in that other crop might attack the pests that are attacking your one crop. So you're basically creating habitat for two different pests that are going to attack each other. Additionally, we can talk about how things such as genetically modified crops are having these traits built into them that make them resistant to these pests. So then they don't even have pest issues at all because the pest comes, tries to eat it. The pest is like, yep, nope, this isn't good. I'm gonna go somewhere else. And that crop is just fine. And there's no need to spray any type of chemical on it. So the good and the bad of IPM. Our benefits, we're reducing the amount of chemical pesticides sprayed on the crops, which saves us money because chemicals are expensive. It's more targeted, it minimizes the impact on native pollinators, minimizes human health risk because again, chemicals are kind of nasty, super expensive, and we're reducing the reliance on pesticides and pesticide resistance of those pest species. Drawbacks, it's complex, it requires constant monitoring, sometimes it's a bit of a slow response, and depending on the method, it could be more expensive. However, farmers don't want to put a lot of chemical on their field, chemical's expensive, and oftentimes IPM is not at that same expense level as spraying and applying chemicals. Now, in summary, remember IPM is trying to manage those pest populations without having large impacts on the environment. We have physical, biological, and chemical controls, along with crop rotation and intercropping. And as I mentioned, genetically modified crops are part of this IPM model. Please send me your questions here at the end, and I hope that as you watch this video, you were able to learn something.